Everyone. Let us begin the Committee on Administration and Finance. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pell? Mr. Pell is present. Dr. Armstrong? Dr. Armstrong is present. Mr. Birkin?
Here.
Mr. Birkin is present. Mr. Castile? Mr. Castile is present. Ms. Champagne?
Here.
Ms. Champagne is present. Dr. Clark? Dr. Clark is not present. Mr. Harris? Mr. Harris is present. Mr. Hollis? Mr. Hollis is not present. Ms. Holloway? Ms. Holloway is present. Ms. Mellarine?
Here.
Ms. Mellarine is present. Mr. Morris?
Here.
Mr. Morris is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. First item, please.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 4.1, 6.1, 6.2, 7.1, and 8.1.
You have a motion. Dr. Armstrong. Second, Mr. Harris. Any objection? Next item, please.
Your first item will be on page 36, item 4.2, consideration of a report from Education Finance staff concerning Bessie authorized charter school budgets and expenditure reports, including irregularities or concerns. The recommendation is to receive the report.
Motion. Ms. Champagne, second. Ms. Mellering. Anything from the?
You have the information. You're good.
All right. Any objections? Seeing none. Next item, please.
On page 43, item 4.3, consideration of LDOE contracts greater than $50,000. Recommendation is to approve.
We have a motion. Mr. Harris, second. Dr. Armstrong. Any concerns? Any objections? Seeing none, motion passes. Next item.
On page 56, item 4.4, consideration of federal and state grants and allocations to LEAs, Type 2 charters, Type 5 charters, approved non-public schools, and community-based organizations, competitive and other. Recommendation is to approve.
Do you have a motion, please? Ms. Champagne, second. Ms. Holloway. Any thoughts? Any objections? Seeing none. Next item.
On page 68, item 4.5, consideration of LDOE contract regarding administration and management of an education savings account program. Recommendation is to approve.
Have a motion, please. Mr. Appel, second. Mr. Harris.
A few comments, Mr. Birkin. So at our last meeting, this board approved a contract for the administration of an ESA. And as I've shared previously, every state that has an ESA has a program administrator that does that work. I think there are a number of advantages to doing it that particular way as opposed to trying to create all of that from within a state agency, hiring employees, having legacy costs, not necessarily having the technical expertise to do that particular work. And so we brought that contract forward. You all approved that contract. The way in which that contract was written, it was a 3-year contract. Basically, it covered the cost of establishing the platform. And then beyond that, it was an up to amount that basically was a per account fee. So for every student involved in the ESA, there would be a fee associated per student that the administrator would receive for managing that particular account. In that contract, we had built in an appropriation clause, which essentially said if funds weren't appropriated by the legislature over that period of time, then the contract was null. We also built in a convenience clause that if for some reason we needed to terminate the contract, that was available. And so I appreciate this board moving forward with that. And time is important here because we have to launch this program early next year. What ended up happening, however, is as it worked its way through the process, because this is a different process than is normal for procurement, as is directed by the actual statute, The Senate Finance felt like that they did not want to go into a multi-year contract on the ESA program administration. And so I had conversations with Senate Finance, and we agreed to go back to the drawing board and create a one-year contract and move forward in that way, which was what we believed that we had heard from Senate Finance that they wanted us to do because they didn't want a multi-year contract. And so what you have before you today is a revision to the approved contract from last time so that it does just reflect a one-year contract. And then what will happen beyond today, should this board approve the contract, is that this will go to JLCB in October for their consideration. Ultimately, the Gator statute says that the department, along with Bessie, has to lift this program, and time is of the essence as we're thinking about getting that off the ground. And so Ken Bradford, Beth C&O from our team are here if you have any particular questions, as well as the vendor is also here should he be needed. But we can start with Ken and Beth. Any questions?
Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Birkin. I do want to get a clear, concise definition of what this contract particularly pertains to on the record today, so that when it does go to the joint budget, that, you know, we're clear and concise on exactly what it does. I think there was some misunderstanding through this process. So if y'all could clear that up, you know, talk about the marketing, the applications, the customer service piece of this first tranche, and then please talk about the 1.8 million that's been allocated. It's already been funded by the legislature, signed into law by the governor, and then how you'll use the last portion of the money that's left over. And I think you're coming back with another contract possibly after the first of the year. So we can kind of just put that out there.
Good morning, Beth C&O with the department. So this contract is limited to the actions that are necessary to stand up the program. First of all, the contract covers the marketing, which is very important to communicate this new program across the state to the schools, the non-public schools, public schools that might be service providers, obviously all of the parents. So the marketing of getting that information out is covered in this contract. In addition, it has the capabilities of standing up the application process. So that is an electronic process that will be available through a web-based program so that parents and service providers can access that to apply for the program. As well as it will be prompting the delivery of a customer service plan or a structure that will allow for interaction with customers, whether that be parents or service providers, so that they can answer questions and help them work their way through the application process, make sure they can complete everything that they need. The other thing it will provide is training not only for the department staff who will be actually working with this system, but as well as for parents and any service providers that need information on how to use the system. Lastly, it will also provide a component in this electronic system with regards to financial management type controls that allow for reporting, for monitoring of the system once it is up and running, to manage and monitor the money that will be running through the system, as well as any reporting for financial compliance, as well as statistics that are being requested to be monitored and reported on the system. So this gets us through the actual stand-up of the whole system, all the different components, not just the electronic side, but all the components necessary to actually launch this program by the March 1st date. With that, the cost is now set at $910,000. That will get us that far. Of the $1.8 million, about $350,000 of that money is actually set aside for us to hire 2 staff, of which we were provided TOs by the legislature. And that includes salary and related benefits and other operating costs. And then there will be a balance of the 1.8, around $500,000 that will be available and will just be held until, A, we get the approval from the Joint Budget Committee to move forward. That money would be available should the decision be made that the system would be up and running and we needed to actually pay for some of the per account services. But that won't be decided till later on in the process. But that money will just be sitting until those decisions are made.
Okay, and I know this question is going to come up at JLCB, and I'd like to know it myself here. Of these programs that they're putting together, the computer service, customer service, the application process, are those going to be proprietary to the state of Louisiana, or is this company going to own them after they're developed?
There are terms in the contract that address that, but perhaps I should let one of the attorneys maybe speak more legally to that. Do you want to? We made sure there was lots of information on that.
Good morning, everybody. Tony Legge, Executive Counsel for the Department of Education. We did put clauses in the contract relative to the proprietary nature of the information, and it is proprietary to the state of Louisiana. We have the representative here from the vendor who could confirm that as well.
So that means once these things are developed, next year, they're there for the state to use, hopefully with this vendor or whatever, but they stay in the state's possession.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have, thank you.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, Mr. Legge, to Mr. Harris's question, if we were to change, for whatever reason, if we were to change vendors at any point in time, then again, the state would own the database, basically.
Yes, that should be our property.
Got it, thank you.
Ms. Betts, you said staff. How many are we talking about?
We only were allocated 2 staff, one in the program office, in the school choice office, and one in my office, to actually kind of oversee and administer and work with the vendor on the systems.
And that was $350,000 for 2 people?
Right, that's about, an average salary at a level that, that gets us, we have an average salary at that we're hoping to hire some experienced people. In my office, for example, it would be someone with some experience in the budget or finance arena, and then you have to pay benefits, and then we have equipment charges, things like that. So it's around 300, maybe a little less than 350.
One point about that, too, if it's okay, Mr. Birkin, is that whenever we're talking about TOs, which are the positions that are allocated to us by the legislature, when we staff in the department on these civil service positions, those positions have an assigned salary schedule that are used. So those civil service positions have to be advertised at the rate that's approved by civil service. So that includes the salary benefit, but also for these 2 individuals, the operational costs needed for them to be able to perform their work.
Okay. Mr. Appel?
Thank you. I know we're talking about the contractual issues and the expenses involved with the contractual issues, but I'm just curious, have we done a model of the actual expenditures required that have to be appropriated for distribution to the recipients and how that compares with current spending?
Are you speaking of like like an award amount?
Yeah, the award amounts for the recipients of the benefits. Have we ever done it in a model like that to see how much it's going to cost and how that? Because I mean, we're faced with a fiscal session this year, and it's obviously going to come up.
I think the the per pupil amounts we've been discussing a lot in our planning meetings. And we have not run an additional simulation. I think we're investigating right now what are some of the like statistical models based on what other states have encountered in their first years with regards to applications. So we would need that kind of usage information to run. But you can imagine if, for example, the scholarship program is scheduled to end on June 30 of this fiscal year.
Correct.
Which would be about 5,800 students we've confirmed
Right.
would actually be automatically eligible. That cost right now is going to be upwards of about $43 million. So that would be the first amount that would need to be placed into the ESA, into an appropriation for an ESA account based on those
Yeah, but that's what I
particular
was asking.
students.
If we had a
Right.
number, because they're going to ask us, the legislative folks are going to ask us for that number and
Right.
for their planning purposes. Thank you.
If I could add to Mr. Appel, so that has been our priority is those students already in the program, making sure that they're accounted for, making sure that to all extents possible, their families don't feel a difference in terms of
Correct.
of the switch that the state's making. And then beyond that, for additional families, we've been working on various modeling, looking at what other states have seen. But as you well know, I mean, a request for funds is going to be a combination of discussion between, our team, BESI members, the governor's office, and the legislature around what they feel like is the right number beyond the scholarship kids, which we firmly believe we've got to take care of them moving into next year.
Right. Well, I'm just saying it's going to become a hot topic, and we're going to have to be able to defend the request we make or the suggestion we make. So that's why I was asking it. But you understand what I'm saying. Thank you.
Mr. Hollis.
I just have a couple of questions. I was hoping I could ask a quick question to Mr. Leegee, if you don't mind. And then after that, you said the vendor is here to speak on this? Okay, that'd be great if I could speak with that individual as well.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Leegee, my question is I'm looking at a lot of different articles, and it seems to me that in dealing with these kind of contracts, it's more often than I would have figured, where mid-year they're upended. And so my curiosity is what kind of protections do we have if we get in a situation where we don't find that we're being delivered what we hope to be delivered? I don't want to be in a situation where all of a sudden taxpayers are on the hook and we've got to go out shopping, mid-year. I know this is going to be a shortened contract. Originally, it was going to be extended, but what if it is a shorter duration of time? Can you speak to that?
Yes, there are provisions in the agreement. The agreement is pretty extensive with respect to our ability to cancel it, number one, and there are provisions in the event that we see that we're not getting what we bargained for in the contract, if that's your question.
Okay, it is. I mean, costly, is it something that you can speak to? Is it going to be, a major calamity?
I think the obligations of the vendor are fairly straightforward in the contract. We'll be able to determine whether there are any problems with it pretty easily under this particular contract, this particular segment of the contract.
Okay.
So, and we've got, again, provisions in there which allow us to take action in the event that we do find there is a breach of their obligation.
Okay, and that's comforting. I appreciate that, because a lot of times you go into these contracts with the expectations that everything is just going to be fine and dandy. I'm just seeing way too many articles of things that are occurring in other states that gives me more concerns than what I'd like to have at this point. But also recognize that time is of the essence, and I don't want to do anything to delay things. But I had that question for you, and I appreciate your answer. And I also was hoping to ask a few questions to you as well. I believe you're the CEO for our vendor. Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Give us your name and position, please.
Sure. Joseph Connor, I'm the founder and CEO of Odyssey.
Okay. Last time you were here, and that was a couple of months ago, one of the questions that I asked, and I get, this is not like an insurance company where people have businesses go back 100, 200 years. This is relatively new, so it's not like there's a great length of timeline for us to go by. One of the things that I take comfort in going by is, hey, who else do you do business with? I had mentioned specifically the state of Idaho, and it was my understanding from our previous conversation that there was a contract for 3 years. However, after that meeting, it was a short time later, I had looked at some sort of communication. I think there was even an article that mentioned that that contract was upended by Idaho prematurely. And so I was just hoping that maybe I misunderstood or misread the article. If you don't mind speaking to that. For you to be at this table, I get that you had to do a lot of qualifying, and so I mean to ask you these questions with all due respect, and I have the full belief that things are going to go along just swimmingly, but the concerns that I've got, I was hoping that you could alleviate that with some sort of explanation.
Sure, absolutely, and I welcome the opportunity. So we've been working with the Idaho State Board of Education to administer a school choice program there called the Empowering Parents Grant Program. The initial contract that we entered into after a procurement process during the summer of 2022 was a 2-year contract. So it was from August 2022 through August 2024. We subsequently did receive an extension of 3 months to continue to administer that through November of 2024. The way that the program works in Idaho is slightly unique. They do what are called fiscal year grants. And so the initial contract was for a period of 2 years because at the time it was passed, that's how long the parents had to spend down the grant. The legislature subsequently amended the law to allow it to go for 3 years. And so that was an extension of that. And so during the months of August and September, we were talking to them about an extension. But in terms of the actual initial term of the contract, we fully met that through August 2024, and then we are providing services through the first extension, which goes through November 2024.
Okay, and that helps, and I appreciate that answer. And again, I think, going forward, we have the expectation that everything is going to be just dandy. It's just something new, so you'll just have to forgive, this extreme vetting, because I think the people that we work for deserve it. I do have another question as it pertains to the software that's going to be utilized by your company. Some have asked me, does that, it's a proprietary type software, is that something that's going to be owned by your company, or in us enacting this contract, is that going to be the property of the state of Louisiana?
So I think that the contract stipulates, as Tony said, that for pieces of data that are customized, as well as all of the data of the vendors, which would include retailers, electronic hardware outlets, schools, all of the data of the parents, all of that continues to remain and will always be owned by Louisiana. We merely run a platform that collects it, but all of the data is essentially owned by the state, and regardless if you continue with us as a vendor or someone else, the state continues to own that, and I think the contract lays that out.
Okay, very good. And then again, I wasn't on the committee, and I'm sure that between LDOE and the various members of Bessie that participated in that, they got to go through all of this. But having not served on that committee, I did have a curiosity. How many states total? And again, I don't expect it to be a very large number, but
Sure.
Idaho, soon to be Louisiana, presumably.
Yes.
And how many other states are y'all engaged in right now?
So we do business in Missouri for the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. There's a program there called Close the Gap, has roughly 23,000 students who are on it. We also administer in Iowa the Iowa Students First Education Savings Account program that has roughly 30,000 students on it. We also, since the last time we've seen you, entered into an additional contract for Nebraska to administer an education scholarship program there with their Office of the Treasurer. That program is slightly on the smaller side, around 3,000 or so students, and all of them provide scholarships or direct funding for high-quality education, everything from school tuition to electronic hardware and software.
Okay, great. And I really do appreciate you being here today to answer these questions for me and the entire board, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Yes, sir. Ms. Millerin.
Thank you, Mr. Birkin. My question was answered. I appreciate it.
Okay, there is someone who wishes to speak at the time right now. Ms. Cheryl Lott with Gordier Community Christian School. Information only, wishes to speak. Thank you all.
Good morning. As he said, Cheryl Lott with the Gardere Community Christian School. We are a small private school here in town that currently serves 99% low income and 99% minority students. When they're working on the per pupil amount, are any school providers or people boots on the ground who are currently doing the work going to be included in those discussions?
So the legislature, as I understand it, is the ones who are going to appropriate the funds
The per pupil amount or the total?
and the per pupil
funds?
amounts of that as well, yes.
Is that correct?
So in our policy, we will establish, or we have established in the first set of rules, the dollar amounts that are available. That was delegated to this board by the legislature. Now, what the legislature will determine ultimately is the total amount of the allocation for the program. And we're more than willing to I've been to your school.
Yeah.
We're more than willing to continue to collaborate with you in whatever way makes the most sense for you. Just reach out to us. We're happy to have additional conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Are there any objections? Seeing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 72, item 5.1. Consideration of 8G funding cycle activities, approval of 8G statewide programs for fiscal year 2024-25. Recommendation is to approve.
A motion, please. Ms. Champagne, second. Mr. Harris. Any discussion? All right. Any objections? Next item, please.
On page 92, item 7.2, consideration of legislative reports. Recommendation is to receive the reports as outlined.
A motion, Ms. Mellerin, second, Dr. Armstrong. Any discussion? Any objection? Seeing none, next item.
On page 112, item 9.1, consideration of revisions to the Louisiana Administrative Code, Title 28, Part 1, the Bessie Code, regarding the establishment of the Bessie Legislative and Governmental Affairs Committee. Recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
A motion, Mr. Morris, second, Ms. Champagne. Call on Mr. Harris to give us an update on, tell us what's going on with this.
Thank you, Mr. Birkin. I think it's very wise that we have decided to put together a legislative committee that will engage with the legislature on everything from policy to funding to ESAs to those things that the legislature runs every year through and makes laws about. So I think it's incredibly prudent for us to get engaged into that process. So the vision of this particular committee would be that it will be kind of the conduit that our members of Bessie will have to kind of participate in that legislative process. One of the first things that this committee will do is, it's already been put together, is inform each member who their representatives and senators are on the two education committees, the House Committee and the Senate Committee, and we'll be asking you and talking to you about cultivating relationships with those. And the ones that you'll be really cultivating are the ones that's in your district, that you serve right now, so that we can have a very good, comfortable, relationship with those members when we need to have that and need to talk to them about things that are important to Bessie and the Department of Education. So you'll be getting, that'll be the first thing that we do right off the bat, is we will be sending out information to you about who your representatives and senators are, and then we'll send you a deck sheet of exactly what you need to do to kind of get involved before the process begins. Then we have a calendar that's been developed that starts with and outlines everything that's happening from now until the end of next session. So the committee will be looking at that. For example, we will know when the legislative planning begins. We know, you will know as a committee and a Bessie member when the days, what the day is that they're actually going to be able to file bills. So, we can engage with our members, and we'll watch this calendar process all the way through so that we're very much involved with those issues that concern Bessie and the Department of Education. So it's similar to what we see in other departments that go before the legislature. I think it will give us a better grasp as a full committee or a full board than just the 3 board officers every year looking at all this information. We're going to have a lot of folks involved with it, and hopefully we'll be able to, influence the legislature in ways that we need influence when it concerns Bessie and the Department of Education. We'll also be working together with, of course, Dr. Brumley and his staff on those issues that we've done in the past, and we'll have a very detailed legislative calendar that's provided by LDOE, and we'll be discussing that on a weekly basis when they're in session. So kind of gives you an overview, but it's going to be a very active committee, and we will have some things that we have to do all the way through the end of next session, which is the end of June, possibly in the upcoming session, because special that starts in November. Everything is on the table in that, remember? So, that concerns the finances of LDOE, and Bessie could be discussed in those meetings. So we'll keep everybody apprised of that. But it's an excellent opportunity for us to really get in knee-deep in the legislative process. And I'm excited for the board that we're taking this step.
Mr. Appel.
Thank you. I also suggest, and we've talked about this, that we reach out to the governor and we work closely with the governor's office in assisting him on education policy agendas, see if we can find commonality in our efforts, and then serve as a conduit between the governor's office and the legislature, and try to get everybody on the same team and pull in the same direction. I know in my past experience, the governor was in one orbit and the legislature was in another orbit, and Bessie was just kind of floating around. But I think this will be a good effort to bring everybody under our auspices, using our bully pulpit, I guess, good word, but using our bully pulpit to try to get everybody pulling in the same direction and doing the same thing. So thank you, Mr. Harris. I think it's a great idea, and we just got to keep going. Thank you.
I know all of you know, but I just wanted to say from the outset of the formation of this board, and everyone that I have spoken to in these last 9-10 months, the unique nature and makeup of this board with 4 ex-legislators, 2 of which were ex-education chairman. Mr. Appel, Senator Appel, was the Senate Education Committee chair, and Mr. Harris was the House Education Committee chair. So we have an opportunity with this particular board to forge a relationship with the legislature and the governor's office that I don't think has ever existed before. And like Senator Appel said, and I say whenever I speak to people, who said, this cart is being pulled in the same direction. The governor's office, the legislature, Bessie, and LDOE, and all the staff here with them who are amazing, as well as our Bessie staff who are amazing. And I am excited for what can happen with education in our state. And then I think we're going in the right direction. And I know we're going in the right direction. Some things we did today and over these last 8 months have, I think, going to pay great dividends. So I'm excited about that. Any other comment?
Just real quick, I wanted to thank Ms. Champagne. It was actually her original idea to develop this committee. So I want to thank her, acknowledge her, and then thank Mr. Harris for his leadership as well to chair this committee.
So my apologies. So Ms. Champagne was ex-legislature, Mr. Hollis, ex-legislature of the 4 that are on here who legislators. So,
One question.
Mr. Hollis?
I like former member instead of ex-member. Can we strike the ex part? It's so harsh, you know, but former member. I'm also excited about this. I know that, believe it or not, some state capitals don't like, you have to be elected in order to speak. I'm always been grateful that in Louisiana, anybody, you know, can go up and speak, not on the House floor or the Senate floor, but anybody. And there are some state capitals that don't allow for that. And the reason I bring that up is, you know, as an individual, I can go and speak to the legislature on any subject as an individual. I'm here representing myself. I could go there and say, hey, I'm here representing Bessie District 1. I think what the hope is for this committee, and I'm thrilled that y'all organized this, is that one united voice going to speak on behalf of Bessie. And I hope that, you know, of the group that is a part of this committee, they will kind of run point on, you know, what that viewpoint, perspective is going to be during session. I just want to make sure that's kind of the idea. Mr. Harris talked about, you know, the tentacles within the community of each of those members, and I think that's awesome. But I also think the biggest voice is during the legislature when they're in session, and I just want to make sure that's part of the plan. I believe it is, but if Simone or Lance, if you don't mind speaking to that'd be great.
I'll be glad to mention that. Yes, definitely. Those members that are on this committee, and of course, all of Bessie, we encouraged that last year, if you remember, in the legislative session, to be at education committee meetings. And part of the vision of this is to be at weekly at those education meetings. So it's going to require a lot of time, a lot of study. But yeah, that is a big part of it. And we know, and you know as a past legislator, it's relationship building. And I appreciate Conrad bringing up the part about the governor's office too. This committee is going to try to make everyone coalesce in the direction that Bessie, our board, feels like we need to go. So it's just a great opportunity. I know my 12 years in the legislature, it wasn't that way. This is going to be new for Bessie, and I think it's way overdue. And it's going to be boots on the ground when we hit in April at this meeting. So thank you.
If all the board members are done, I would like to respond and just say how much I welcome this as well, because you all know that for our agency, we go over to the legislature, we provide information, we have relationships, but we have limits that are imposed on us, whereas you all as elected members of Bessie or appointed members, I believe can really take it to the next level. And our office is certainly going to support you in this work. But, you know, I think it's a really, really great idea. I was glad when I heard you guys beginning to discuss it. And I think it will bring further clout to Bessie, too, on cementing the work that you're trying to do for kids around the state of Louisiana and the state as a whole. So I'm really excited about it as well. And just ask that, you know, to all extent possible, keep us looped in on ways in which we can help. And our legislative team will continue to do the practices that we have around communication and tracking and all those types of things.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that we do have also a colleague that is very, very close to a current member of the legislature. So we're blessed to have that as well. Anything else? Any objections? Seeing none, that motion passes. Next item.
On page 114, item 9.2, consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding communication pathways. Recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent revisions to Bulletin 126 and Bulletin 741.
Motion, Mr. Castillo. Second, Ms. Champagne. Any discussion?
Yes, sir. So this particular item is an item that has been discussed with a number of different board members around communication out to local systems, and I think it's probably appropriate for Mr. Morris as board president to share information here.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. So as we move forward in a board and we look to support our teachers, provide more opportunities for our students. We consider new policy development and whatnot, work with our stakeholders on that. Communication is extremely vital to do that effectively. And so this last review, or this last stage of the review of the revisions to the accountability system, several of us, I got feedback from several members, and we were just really, I'm going to say something short of shocked at some of the misinformation that was being shared. And we know that we had to dedicate resources to go and address that misinformation, so that, first of all, we assured that we were getting accurate information to make decisions on our side, but also to make sure that accurate information was being communicated throughout the state to all our stakeholders. With some of the feedback that we got from district superintendents, as well as school administrators, feel like there's an opportunity here to streamline some of that communication process. And so we want to reach out and make sure that we're sharing the information that comes to this board with the school board members throughout the state. And so that's the intention here, is to make sure we're making best efforts to provide good, clear communication to our school board members throughout the state. So as the State Department of Education has developed key performance indicators for this board to look at what our goals are, to track our progress, and evaluate that, consider whether or not we need to pivot, consider new strategies, or if what we have in place is actually working to benefit our students. So we want to make sure they're getting the same information that we are, they have an opportunity to discuss it, and that's the intent behind this motion.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Any objections? Seeing none. Next item.
That concludes your agenda.
Thank you all for remaining. We will re-adjourn at 1 o'clock. Thank you.